Hi everyone, my name is Linda.
And my name is Carolina.
And welcome to our podcast, It's Not Just Tech.
This is a podcast about the lives of two newly graduated friends moving from Canada to the United States to work for a corporate software company,
where we share our insights on the tech industry, our experiences, and adventures together moving to a new country.
So today is episode 2, former electronic arts intern tackles the gaming industry. We have a special guest speaker with us, Haoda Fan. Haoda has had over 2 years of paid industry experience in the gaming industry and plans to continue working on games for full time. He has went viral before on the Subtle Asian Traits Facebook group by sharing his iconic comics and has competed in StarCraft tournaments before, which he's won monetary prizes for. Haoda, take it away.
I'm super excited to be here. I'm a University of Waterloo student. I haven't graduated yet, but I will this semester. I've been to a bunch of internships before. I've done 6 in total. Internships that are relevant to today's podcast are my work term at EA in Montreal, where I worked at Motive Studio on Star Wars Squadrons. My second gaming internship was at Next Level Games, where I traveled to Vancouver. They're pretty famous for making Luigi's Mansion 3, which came out recently. I actually got to go to their release party, which was awesome. Now I am working for, and will continue to work for, this company called Blackbird Interactive, which is another Vancouver-based game company that is most well known for their strategy games, Homeworld, Deserts of 𝐇𝐀𝐃. What I do outside of tech is I'm pretty involved in a cappella. This semester, I'm actually the president of ACE, which is Waterloo's non-audition a cappella group. I also really like drawing stuff. I like post comics on Reddit and like Facebook, and 2 of my comics, as Carolina have mentioned, have gone viral. Each got like 7K likes. In school, I'm also doing a history minor. Pretty much it. Currently, I am working part-time at Blackbird and trying to finish school. I have 2 courses left until I am out of here.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to have you here. So it's sad that we won't get to do this in person, but I think we can gain valuable insight from experiences all the same. So I wanted to ask you, what made you want to work in the game industry as opposed to like a generic software role?
It's a little bit of a childhood dream of mine. It's kind of the reason why I went into software development in the first place, is because when I was like 15, I'd always go on this site called like ModDB, which is just like a place where you would post your game modifications. And I would just like go on that site and I try to find cool mods for my game and like talk to people about, oh, this is my idea for a mod. Do you want to see this art that I made? It's like I always sort of thought that it would be really fun to be a game developer. When I came to Waterloo, I sort of forgot about it. Third co-op where I worked for EA, and then I was just like, oh, it's actually pretty nice.
Nice. Yeah, gaming does tend to attract a lot of computer science students over. So I want to ask you, what do you usually work on? Do you work on like the graphics, the engine? And tell us about it.
Yeah, so the team that I worked with at EA is called Core Tech, and they do mainly like engine stuff. That involved working with their engines and tools, and people would go up to me and be like, hey, like this part of the editor doesn't work, and I'll like fix that or stuff like that. My second co-op, which was at Next Level Games, I worked as a tools programmer, which was, in my opinion, pretty similar in that like I didn't really work on the game like itself, but I worked on the tools that everybody else used to make the game. So for example, like level designers, they need like a level designing app so they can put tiles down and be like, oh, this is how this puzzle is going to look like, and that's how that puzzle is going to look like. And so I mainly worked on that kind of stuff. Yeah, and right now at BBI, I'm working for the gameplay team, which is the team that is most directly associated with the game. So I work a lot with the designers who are like, oh, we want to make this system in the game, or like the artists that are like, hey, this texture, I want this texture on this model, like, can you do that for me?
That's really cool. Yeah. Do you have like a type of game that you work on, like 3D or like the 2D games, first-person shooters?
Most games I work on are 3D games. Every game company has been like a very different kind of game that I worked on, right? So Star Wars Squadron is like a space, like you're piloting like a spaceship, right? And you're like pew 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 shooting like with lasers and stuff. Luigi's Mansion 3 is like more of like a game that's for kids. It's like kind of like in the Mario universe, you're like Luigi and you go around, you suck ghosts into your little machine or whatever.
I love Luigi.
This semester, though, I unfortunately can't tell you too much about the game that I'm working on. It's sort of under NDA.
The
Gaming
surprise.
companies are very strict about this kind of stuff. So
Wow, that's very cool, Haoda. I do not have a lot of experience on developing games, but I think that's really nice that it was a childhood dream of yours.
yeah.
And
You're
you
like
pursued it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get paid for it. Like that's amazing. Not a lot of people can say that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I'm pretty fortunate in that regard.
It's also known in the tech world, though, despite how fun gaming might seem, that stereotypically the gaming industry doesn't always have the best culture. Is it okay if you could elaborate on that, or why is?
Yeah, sure. So I think okay, the main thing with the main problem, I guess, in working in games is like this. It kind of stems from the same reason why I want to work there in the same at the first place because it's my kind of like childhood dream or whatever, right? To work for games because I like playing games, right? So it's like, oh,
Right.
I like playing games. I want to work for a game company. But that's also true for like a lot of people. So the games industry is actually like pretty competitive in terms of like demand for jobs. And companies know this, right? So game companies know that, they have like a lot of people who want to work for them. So it kind of allows them to treat their employees like crap sometimes, where they can expect you to work like long hours with no overtime for less pay than everyone else, just because there's like 10 other people who want your position. So if you don't like working here, like you can just leave. Essentially, that's yeah.
Oh, I see. So it's very saturated for them.
It is
The
pretty
game market.
saturated, yeah. There's some other
Okay.
things that I don't like about the games industry as well. Like, for instance, some companies have like really big heads. And a lot of companies that make the games that I really like to play have kind of almost like an arrogant attitude where they're like, oh yeah, like our games are so great. It is a privilege for you to work for us. Like, you have like no right to complain.
It sounds intense. And I also heard there's crunch times too because
Mhm,
there's the schedules based on the release time of the game.
mhm.
So you have to like work really hard, and then after that, people sometimes leave because they find different projects. Is that true?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is absolutely true. Although I find that it is getting better for the most part, especially at the larger companies. They're starting to recognize that, oh, crunch time might not actually be like that good, and we need to plan our schedules and plan our games better so that we can avoid that at like yeah, in the future. Electronic Arts is especially notorious for this because and this is definitely something that I've noticed working at their co-op. Like I, as a co-op, I never once was asked to do overtime or anything like that, but
Mhm.
I did sort of feel the pressure from my fellow coworkers that they're all starting to get a little bit worried that now that the game is like going into production and the release dates are coming soon, that they might be asked to work overtime and that kind of stuff. But
I see.
personally, I never really experienced it, and hopefully, I won't ever have to. But
That's true, yeah.
yeah,
That's nice at least they excluded you from that. So you're
yeah.
an intern at the point. So despite all of these cons, what makes you still want to pursue gaming?
I mean it's still something that I like, right? Like I still like making games, and I really like how my end product is something that I would enjoy sort of playing if I were to like buy that game or whatever, right? I also felt like game companies were culturally kind of different from other tech companies, and I sort of fit in a lot better with
Mm.
that kind of culture. And I don't know, it's also generally like the work is a bit more interesting. I would consider myself a much more visual person, visual creative person. So working like on a game where I can like where testing things out means like I go into the game and I like see if
That
it
is
works
pretty
like in
cool.
game or not. Like that's
Yeah.
that's a lot more of what I like to do rather than like
Follow your
let me see if
passions,
this
right?
text like comes back to me when I like send it to the server or something.
I feel called out. No, that's great. So it's like a passion project for you. And I guess it's natural to want to work overtime if it's something that you're super passionate about.
Yeah.
So it might not be a huge deal to some people. That's pretty cool how testing sounds a lot more fun than testing I've been
I
used
wouldn't say it's a
to.
lot more fun. I would not say it's a lot more fun. I just think it's more interesting and it's a little bit more suited to what I like to do.
Well, just moving on. So you did mention before, like, of your co-ops, you like gaming the most, but we also noticed that you did do a more conventional software engineer role for your fifth co-op. Could you elaborate more on your role there?
Oh yeah, sure. So I was working as a back-end developer for this San Francisco software engineering company. They make like a web app. So it was basically web development.
So what did you notice about the cultural differences, if there were any, between this company and your gaming experiences?
I would say that it definitely felt personally the San Francisco web company, it felt a lot more competitive and there was a lot more pressure in the work environment to perform and to do your work independently. One example, I guess, of this, probably not true for like most tech companies, but in that particular company, people like cared about how they use their time. So if you like wasted someone's time with like a question that they think they already answered or something, like they'll be upset with you, which I thought was kind of scary actually. Like
I see.
Sort of made me not want to ask questions at all.
So you feel like the gaming industry has more of a collaborative culture and everyone's willing to help you out?
That's actually been more or less my experience, but I feel like but a lot of people have told me that I've just haven't had good co-ops that aren't game co-ops.
That's fair.
So it might just be like my own personal experience. But the one big cultural difference I've noticed personally is that I just tend to fit in a lot better with people who work with game developers versus other sort of developers. And I think the main reason for that is like, I don't know, when I talk to them, it's just a lot easier because I already know we have one common like thing, and is that we like playing games, right? Like we already have that in common. So it sort of breaks the ice a lot better. Also, they also feel less competitive and more sort of, it just feels like more chill. Like it's a little bit hard to explain, but they're just kind of there because they like playing games and they like making games. So
they're not trying to climb the ladder, right?
Yeah, and they're not necessarily trying to climb or trying to like work really hard to impress anybody. It's a bit less of that.
Nice. Okay, nice. I'm glad to hear that. When you went into this fifth co-op with the more conventional role, did you feel like your gaming skills were transferable? Because you did backend, right?
For the most part, no. And the reason for this is because okay, there probably is a lot of transferable skills, but I feel like there's nothing. How do I explain this? So there's a lot of things that do transfer, like just general like work skills and programming skills will transfer over, but a lot of the specifics don't. So for instance, in game companies, you typically program in C++. Mm-hmm. Not true for most web development, like backend or front end. You mostly do that in like JavaScript. That doesn't transfer over. So what I sort of found is that when I was working at my fifth co-op, like I didn't feel like someone who has worked at like 5 other co-ops before, right? Like I sort of felt like a lot of things were really new to me because I've never worked with like this particular JavaScript framework and I've never really worked with React or like Node or like this kind of stuff. So all of that was pretty new to me. There are definitely things that transfer over, but yeah, it's more things transfer over if you work for like another company that does JavaScript. I would say.
Yeah. So there's just more of a learning curve there. If someone wanted to, let's say, dabble in gaming, do you feel like the other way around would be easier? Like if you started off as back end and then you decide to like try out gaming?
I don't know if it's easier, but I definitely think it's totally possible. Like you could just do that. Like it's not going to be like a huge issue. I think personally, I found the transition to the other way around more difficult because I feel like going into my fifth co-op, it was almost expected that I had experience in a lot of those things because this is like, I'm so late into like my schooling. When in reality, I had like almost no experience with like a lot of the tools they were using.
I see. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for the insight.
Yeah, those are really, really interesting points that you made. So I know you mentioned that you're a passionate gamer yourself ever since you were a kid, but would you say to succeed in this industry, you would have to be a passionate gamer yourself, or can you remove the software development process away from like having the need to like also like playing games?
So being a passionate gamer is just something that companies like like you to have. They're just like, it helps you like fit in with the culture, and also the companies can exploit you slightly more because they know that you really want this job. But really, you don't need to be like a passionate gamer to make games. There's like actually a very big difference between playing games and making games. Like it's a totally different skill set that you need. Even like designing games, like you think that like people who are like really good at playing games would be like great game designers, but that's actually also like a completely different skill set that you'll need to learn. So yeah, it's
nice to have. Would you say like most of the coworkers that you meet are like gamers themselves, or do you meet like a number of them who are just there because they like the work but might not be really into games?
So I would say something like 80% of my coworkers are people who play games regularly. And there are quite a few that don't really play games. For instance, like the HR person that I interviewed with, and she later introduced me to like the company and everything at Next Level Games. She was like, yeah, I don't really play games. I just really like working here. Like,
nice.
I just really
it's
like
good too.
people.
Yeah. So those are great points. I know that there's a lot of people who want to get into the gaming industry. Maybe like high schoolers who have a history of playing a lot of games themselves. What advice would you give to those people on how to build their portfolio, and what skills should they focus on prioritizing and learning?
I would say the most important thing to do is to just make games. Like, just do it, man. Like, I don't
Just
like,
do it
every time.
Yeah, because okay, here's the thing: if you don't have prior game internship experience, what's the next thing that the company's gonna like look for, right? Is just, have you made games before? Like, and you don't necessarily need to start off like with like a super ambitious project, right? Like, you could just make like a really simple game on like Python. There's like a super easy to learn Python library called Pygame, and that's where I made most of my first few games. Like one of the first games I've ever made was something that I called Bad Gario, which is Agario, except it was mine and it was also pretty bad.
I love
and
that.
I just made it on Pygame, and it's super simple. There's no multiplayer component to it. You just run around and you eat stuff. At some point, I added like a final boss kind of ball that was chasing you, and once you get big enough to eat it, you can eat the final boss. And I put a picture of my friend's face on it, and I asked that person to voice act for me. So every single time like the ball would come into vision, he'd be like, "I see you," and then like every time it gets close to you, he's like, "I'm gonna get you." Like, I don't know, you can have a lot of fun making games. I think it feels very different from other side projects that I've done where, for example, if I make something for like a Google competition at like a hackathon, that feels very different from like making a game for fun, because one of them you're kind of doing and it almost feels like work, at least for me, and the other one it's like, oh, like, wouldn't it be funny if I did this? Like, add that in. Like, I don't know, it's a different vibe.
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah, I would say just start making games, man. Also, like, I don't know, another game that I made that was on my resume for like a semester is literally a game called the Goose Simulator, where you were a goose and you walked around, and if you pressed the space bar, it honked, and that was it. Like, that was the only thing the game did. But I don't know, it's a thing, right? Like, it's a thing that you made and you programmed it, and you can just start off with small things like that, and you can like work your way up.
Shout out to Waterloo Culture on all the geese.
Yeah, really
that was a fun game. I remember you showed it to us.
So let's like get a little bit technical. How does the average gaming interview differ from, would you say, like a general software interview?
I think the biggest difference is they ask you C++ questions, and a lot of C++ questions.
Like LeetCode style C++ questions, or?
Very specifically C++ and object-oriented programming questions. So if you're in Waterloo, that means you need to brush up on your CS246, because that course was really good for my EA interview. I would say that's the main difference. Everything else is like pretty much the same as like your normal tech interview. They'll ask you about your resume, your projects, your past work experience, that kind of stuff. Sometimes they'll ask you like some fun questions like, oh, what's your favorite game? Why is that your favorite game? On the technical side, the main thing is just the C++. You'll need to brush up on that for sure. Pointers, object-oriented programming, garbage collection, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
All that good stuff.
All the good stuff.
All that good jazz.
All the stuff that the school actually teaches you, which is
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
People complain like, oh, like I hate how like my school like teaches like I have to go to this class, and then when I go to like my JavaScript job, it's like I'm just moving elements around. It's like no. For the game, if you want to work in games, like you need to know like C++ and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, everyone in U of T is like, oh, first year coding is so useless, but I guess it's like useful, you know, it's depending on what you want to work on. So yeah. So yeah, like what is the average career progression in the industry like?
Average career progression is, I would say it's like almost identical to like a normal software engineering role. Like, you know, you can just start off as like a junior programmer and you become senior programmer. One thing that, I don't know if it's similar to other roles, but I was talking to my manager earlier about like career progression, and he was like, yeah, generally people, as they progress in their career, they split off into like one of two paths. One is they can either become like a specialist in some regard, where like, oh, like maybe you're an engine specialist and you know a lot about the engine that you're working on, and you can and you're like kind of the wizard in that sort of area. And sort of the other direction is you become some sort of lead, like you're a team lead, tech lead, that kind of stuff, and you sort of start to manage people more than you would before.
Where do you see yourself, like, of the two splits?
I have no idea.
It's a surprise.
Everything's surprised. Yeah.
I have no clue. I think probably more on the people end. I feel like that sort of fits my personality a little better because I don't know. I'm kind of a people person, and I'm not super like deeply analytical. Like I don't do particularly well in like my classes and stuff. So I sort of see myself more in the leading specialist.
So one last question: would you ever design a game yourself? Because some of my favorite games are indie games. Wondering if you would ever become like an indie game developer, if that's ever in your like path.
That's also kind of the dream, but probably not. I don't think I have the discipline to make an indie game. Although now, I guess the dream has sort of shifted more of like an indie, starting my own indie company, which I think is, like, it sounds like harder, but I think personally for me it's easier because, like, I don't know, if I'm like just like I can't, I'm not the type of person to like lock myself in my room and just grind out a game after 2 years, like, which is what a lot of indie developers do.
That's true.
I'm not really that kind of person. So it's actually surprisingly more realistic, the idea of starting a new company with other people.
Okay.
That sounds amazing. I'd support your company.
Thank you. I mean, I'm probably not going to do that, but like,
no. Yeah, be positive.
Like,
if I had to choose, I guess.
Well, that's it from us today. Thank you so much for being on our show. It's Not Just Tech, Haoda. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell, and give it a big thumbs up.
This episode can also be found on all podcasting platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, and more.
So comment down below if there are any topics you'd like us to discuss, and be sure to follow us on our Instagram. It's Not Just Tech for updates. And Haoda, your time to plug.
I guess you can follow me on my Instagram. It's at 𝐅𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿. Haoda is how you spell my name. It's just like my Instagram. I also have like a random Instagram where I post comics sometimes, like 𝐅𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐶omics. I also have a YouTube channel where I have like I make like random covers of songs. That's just 𝐅𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 if you want to follow that as well. But yeah.
You should follow him. It's very good content. If you ever feel sad or you want a good laugh, just follow 𝐅𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿. Cool. Well, we'll see you back next week on
It's Not Just Tech.